Hello. Welcome to the Empowered Artist Collective podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Apple, a multi-hyphenate actor, educator, acting coach, writer, dog mom, and founder of this vibrant community that champions artists as they carve out their own unique paths in this wild industry. Whether you're just starting out, in the thick of it, or seeking a bit of artistic fuel to expand your toolbox, you're in the right place. In this space, we'll have honest conversations, share actionable strategies, tips, and resources, and delve into the messy yet beautiful journey of living a sustainable, creative life. We unmask the reality of life as an artist, from navigating career highs and lows to nurturing your full human well-being. I chat with women and non-binary guests who share their personal stories, helpful learnings, and hearts to help you unlock your artistic potential, expand your knowledge, and show up fully and fearlessly in your artistry and daily life. Before we dive into this week's conversation, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. If today's chat resonates with you, please leave us a review. It helps us reach even more incredible artists just like you. And hey, feel free to spread the love. Share this podcast with a friend or post it on your socials, making sure to tag at Empowered Artist Collective and at @JenniferApple_ so we can chat with you there. All right, grab a cup of something cozy, settle in, and let's get to it. How do you build a multidisciplinary directing career in today's entertainment landscape? In this episode of our director miniseries, I chat with Sammi Cannold, who shares her journey as a director of theater, opera, TV, film, and ceremonies. From directing Broadway's How to Dance in Ohio to shadowing on Grey's Anatomy to participating in Sundance's collab program, Sammi breaks down the hustle necessary for each area of the industry. She offers actionable tools and candid insights into what it means to work across mediums, practical advice on using university resources while in school, the importance of strategic preparation for projects, and how she gamifies the hustle of sending emails. We talk about the continuous humbling and education needed to learn what one doesn't yet know, tangible tips on team building, hiring decisions, and managing interpersonal dynamics. This episode empowers emerging and established directors with real-world strategies, practical resources, and a deep understanding of the responsibility directors carry, not just artistically, but structurally and emotionally. Enjoy. Sammi Cannold, welcome to the space.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here.
For anybody who does not know you, who are you today?
It changes every day. Today, I am a director working in theater, initially primarily in musical theater, but now I work in sort of all kinds of theater. I also work in film and TV and some ceremony work and a little bit of opera, so kind of all over the map, but I love getting to tell stories regardless of the medium.
I love that you're, I guess, would you call it like a multidisciplinary director? Is that a label that people use for directing? I feel like they use that more when it comes to music.
You know, it's something that I haven't like fully embraced, but I think that's probably accurate. And I think for me, it's really only as of this year that I'm kind of working in all those different mediums simultaneously, and I feel really lucky that I get to do that. But I guess it is multidisciplinary, but they all share a lot of similarities, and then a lot of the specifics are quite different. And there's been I've had a bit of a learning curve in each of those disciplines in terms of learning the specifics and the technicalities and the jargon that might be specific to each kind of adjacent sub-industry.
Yeah, I'm going to put a pin in that. I want to double back to how you arrived into directing land to begin with, and then I want to hear how you have adapted to each.
Absolutely. Well, directing lands, I was very lucky. I was my parents worked in theater and film when I was a kid, and so I was around it. I was really immersed in it, and it was sort of a joke that I was, going to go into the family business, and I resisted that for a long time.
In like an active way, like you were like, no, I'm going to become a doctor.
Oh yeah, I mean, except for me, it was education policy. I was like, I'm going to do the furthest thing from the arts. I think it was because I really was deeply in love with what my parents did, but I was sort of conscientious of that privilege, and I wanted to make my own way and like figure out my own thing. And I think that, coming back to it, which I ultimately did when I got to college, was something that it was like, no, I think this is really like what I love and what I want to do with my life. And it's a consciousness of that privilege and, you know, what it's given me and how I, you know, use it and pay it forward, that I think guides my ability to kind of like reckon with, you know, that upbringing and also, you know, what my personal journey is now.
Yeah. Was there a single moment that was like, actually, let's stop resisting. Or was it just like over time, you're like, no, actually there's this yearning and I got to lean back in?
Yeah. You know, I always did theater for fun. You know, and when I got to college, I was taking like all these really hardcore policy classes. And not to say that theater is not hardcore, theater is very hardcore, but that was not comparative. But in the evenings, I was doing student theater with like student theater groups at my university for my enjoyment. And I realized like 3 weeks into college that I was pretty miserable in my policy classes, and I was having such a blast in my sort of extracurricular theater time. And it occurred to me that I was like, oh, this isn't high school. This is college. Like I can study the thing that I am enjoying the most. And so 3 weeks into college, I changed my major to theater.
Wow.
And I haven't looked back since.
Wow.
So it kind of was just really natural. And I think directing specifically was something that like I'd always been interested in since I was a kid. And I was fortunate to grow up seeing a lot of directors working. I think a lot of kids just will see the end product. They'll see the people on stage, but they won't really know what the job is of the person who, you know, stages a number or the many different jobs that are behind the scenes. So I was really lucky that I saw that. And I think I immediately kind of gravitated towards directing. I was very lucky. I got to direct. And I say that in quotations. I mean, because I was a teenager, but I was called the director at a, you know, summer camp in my town when I was a teenager. And so I'd already kind of, you know, touched that line of work a little bit. And so it kind of all fit together really naturally my freshman year of college.
I love it. And so you went through college doing that. How did you know when you exited, what to do as a director to begin doing it professionally? I feel like I ask that just because, you know, many folks who come out of the university spaces in a theater track tend to be dabbling more specifically in an acting land. And then there is the nebulous world of like, I go on Playbill, I go on Backstage, I go on, you know, Actors Equity, and I find the auditions and I go. What about the directing? Did you know maybe from family or life? And then how did you do that?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's every person has to kind of reinvent the wheel when they approach finding work as a freelance director or really anything. You know, for me, it was a lot about like, how many darts can I throw at the dartboard in hopes that one of them will stick and lead to something. And that hustle was and remains very, very, very challenging. And if that's true of me, somebody who grew up around it and had a lot of relationships and like information and understanding of the industry, I think that's doubly true for folks who don't. So that's not to discourage anybody, but it is to say that I think that like pursuing a freelance career in theater today takes like a deep willingness to hustle and send cold emails and, you know, try absolutely everything until you start, you know, getting traction somewhere. And even then you have to keep trying everything until you get traction somewhere. So for me specifically, the route was when I was a sophomore in college, I worked as a production assistant on the national tour of the Gershwin's Porgy and Bess when it was in San Francisco, because my university was 45 minutes away from that theater. So it kind of all worked out. I got this PA position, and Diane Paulus was the director of that show. And through that, I got to know her. I got to know the folks at the A.R.T. And eventually they, after a lot of hustling and emailing and knocking on their door endlessly, they offered me a job there when I graduated from undergrad. So I went there as I was called an artistic fellow. And my job was basically to read scripts for the artistic office and do kind of miscellaneous tasks for the artistic office. Yeah. And then I assistant directed a number of shows in the A.R.T season that year. And that job was kind of the job that led to everything else that came after it for me.
Yeah. I love that you knew while you were in school to begin that hustle. I feel like, when I teach masterclasses and workshops in university spaces, I'm meeting a lot of them often like their senior year, and then they feel this real angst, I'd say, around like, well, oh God, I didn't use this resource. The offering here is like when you're in this space where you've probably invested a lot of time and money to be there, there are usually like so many different resources that are untapped that I think we are afraid to ask about using. Like when we had Macy Schmidt on here, she was talking about getting your music played, when you orchestrate in front of like a whole orchestra. Mm-hmm. And right when you're in a university space, you have like an entire music department that they can, play your music and hear it out. Or in this case, like, cool, like I have all these fellow artists that are in, like, here's a piece that I want to put up, but also knowing, okay, there are people who could potentially connect me, or I'm close to the proximity to this place. Like, let me reach out accordingly when you're still in this beautiful little protected, incubated moment that you have a cushion to come back to for a couple of years. I love that you knew to do that, and that therefore there was maybe perhaps a little less anxiety when you left of like, oh, I have this now that I don't know what it will lead to, but I've built these relationships over time while I was in this little bit of a cushion.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. And I think that, for me, I kind of had to learn it more than like automatically knowing it, because I think when I got to college, I went to Stanford and it's in California. And so for me, as soon as I decided I wanted to do theater, there was a little bit of a sentiment of like, oh, I'm so far away from New York. Like, mm-hmm. I just want to graduate and like go start working. Like, and I think in retrospect, I feel that was like really naive. And I learned over the course of my time in college that I had to do exactly what you said, which was sort of embrace the opportunities that are available to you when you're a student that aren't available to you the second you graduate. That the fact that when you want to do a show, you don't have to pay for space. Mostly, you don't have to pay actors. The actors are free. All those things that like I didn't really think about. That as soon as I graduated became like really, major considerations. And there's also this, I think, element of it where if you email someone as a student and say, I'm a student doing a research paper on XYZ, can I talk to you about this? I think people are a lot more likely to engage and give information than if you're knocking on the door saying, I want a job, because they'll just say, I'm sorry, I don't have any jobs to give. Right. Like, so I think that, I wrote a lot of, papers in college that required me to like interview different people that then I was able to sort of build relationships with. And, ultimately that led to jobs, not really like intentionally. It wasn't like a manipulative, like, hey, can I no paper so you can give me a job? But it's like building relationships more naturally rather than like knock, knock, knock. So I can't recommend enough, to folks who are in school, like sort of cherishing the fact that you're in school, finding the unique opportunities that you can only get in school. I was just saying this to an assistant director who I've worked with a number of times, and he has directed a number of productions at his university. And he was asking me, for my senior year, what do you think I should do? And I was like, well, I think if you haven't yet done a certain style of directing, that you feel like you wouldn't be, you wouldn't want to take the risk of trying out in the real world. Now's the moment to do it. Like if you haven't directed Shakespeare ever and you're curious if it's like a style that would fit for you, do it in college so that the first time you do it is not when like the New York Times is going to
stakes are high. Exactly. Like, your whole reputation is at stake.
Yeah. Protected bubble.
Yeah. I love that as a piece of advice for young folks. Because now I'd say there are definitely like programs that are specifically for directing a lot more than say when we were starting out, at least I know for myself. But I think it's also interesting to hear like, okay, I might be interested. This actually, I'm not sure if this is, and then just like knowing that this is something that is possible for you if you are listening and you were still in that kind of space. I love that. Hi, actor friends, talking to you. If finding the perfect monologue has you feeling stuck, I've got just the thing. I've put together a free monologue selection toolkit just for you. It's packed with resources, free and paid options, plus tips for choosing, editing, and customizing pieces to showcase you. Head over to jenniferapple.net/freebie and stop avoiding the auditions that ask for a monologue or waiting for the perfect piece to simply fall into your lap. Dive into this free toolkit that I set up just for you that'll set you up to feel agency over your process and artistry. That's jenniferapple.net/freebie and get started on finding your next go-to monologue. Flashing forward then, now you're in professional land, you're in your career, you had this incredible opportunity at A.R.T. How has it been going? Let's talk about your career in your multidisciplinary spaces. I'm going to keep calling it that just because I can. It makes it easier. How have you been finding where you end up spending your energy? Is it more that the opportunities come to you, that you're like, actually, no, I'm really craving, say, an opera, and you put yourself into those, cold emailed spaces? Like, how are you finding and how are you sustaining and where are you finding the joy?
So it's interesting. I think that over the last decade, because I graduated college 10 years ago. Wow. It's the answer has sort of changed every week in the sense that like I find careers are very seasonal in that, you'll have moments where you're like dizzy with how busy you are and things are all landing on top of each other and you're like really overwhelmed. And then you'll have moments where you're like, oh gosh, am I ever going to work again? I've had both. I think anybody who was alive during the pandemic has had both. But I think that, I love musicals. That was sort of my entryway into directing. Directing revivals of musicals was sort of like the very first thing that I started with. And then from there, directed a number of new plays. And then I think, for the past few years, it's been mostly musical theater I did one opera, I did Carmen at Rose Hall at Lincoln Center. But I think that for me, a lot of it was Broadway was this like amazing thing that I so wanted to be a part of. And I was really lucky that when a year after I graduated college, I was hired as the assistant and then the associate director on Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812 on Broadway. And that was incredible to like be in that environment. It was really overwhelming to be in that environment at 22. But I was so lucky and I got to be exposed to it. And I think then the idea of directing on Broadway sort of became the next goal, so to speak. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a maybe reductive way for me to put it, because I don't necessarily think of things in terms of like the arena they're in. It's more about like which stories I'm excited to tell. But there was definitely something about directing on Broadway that felt like a milestone. And so I got to direct on Broadway in 2023. And it was a very like thrilling thing. And I think that from after that moment, because it was sort of like, I've gotten to like live this, musical theater kid dream, what is the next frontier? Because the next frontier could be more of the same. And it could be something different. And I think that, for me, I decided that I was excited about more of the same, but I was also excited about adding, other, like dimensions of directing onto that: film, TV, ceremonies. And I think there's a notion that some people who do film or TV, they leave theater. And for me, what I'm really excited about is building a career where I actually get to do all of it and
Yeah.
like bounce back and forth, and one feeds the other, and I learn something from one that I can use in the other. And so that's this year is the first year that I'm really working in 4 different industries, and I'm really grateful for that and excited about that. And I feel like it's a little crazy. It's a lot of juggling, but I love the way that it stretches my brain.
Yeah. How are you knowing how to enter each? Because in some ways they're a little different.
Yeah. It's a lot of like putting myself through like going back to school in each one, basically. Not literally going back to school, though in some cases, like in feature film land, for example, I am in a Sundance program that also provides access to these incredible courses that Sundance has through a program called Collab, that you can go online and you can literally take, I mean, anybody can do this. You don't have to be in the program. You can take courses that teach you different elements of filmmaking that you might not know. So I've taken 4 of those online courses to like give myself a crash course in film. In like episodic TV. I was really lucky that I got to shadow a full episode on Grey's Anatomy. So I was on set for 150 hours and like got to really soak all of that in. So it's things like that it's like you have to, I think, intentionally carve out the time to learn what you don't know, because while I think that I have a base level of fundamental knowledge in how to put up a musical, until a year ago, I didn't have that base level of knowledge in episodic TV or in feature film. And so I had to like say, okay, you know, this month, I'm not going to, I'm going to not do theater. I'm not going to like take a traditional capital J job. I'm going to go learn for a month. Like, and you have to be, I think you have to have also a sense of humility about that, because you might know what you know in one corner, but you don't know what you don't know in another corner. So it's about sort of like knowing what you don't know.
I love your sense of hunger. I love your sense of humility. I love your desire to continue learning and recognizing that in order to balance and add on these other areas of interest, you need to sometimes go back to basics, and that doesn't take away from what you know. Like, I think there's perhaps some folks might hear like, oh gosh, like if I try this new thing, even though I'm technically a director, but now I'm in this thing that I'm at, you know, quote unquote, this level now, it's so much quote unquote lower. There's an identity crisis that can go into that instead of recognizing like, no, this is actually supplemental and hopefully additional to what I already know, and arguably is going to strengthen these things that I already know I have, and actually shed more light onto things that I'm questioning or not even aware of that I do or wish I did. And I'm really impressed by you knowing yourself well enough to know where you will put yourself in order to learn these things and grow. It's really admirable, and arguably like what makes you the director that you are, which is really incredible. I'm curious though, like how you landed the shadowing experience. Like the Sundance thing, I imagine you had to apply and then get accepted.
The Sundance thing is there's an open call every year, and it's for feature length screenplays, and anybody can submit a screenplay, and then they accept, I think it's about 10 writers or teams for an in-person lab, and then 10 writers or teams for an intensive that's virtual. So my husband and I had written a screenplay together, and we were selected for the latter, for the intensive. And we were very surprised and very grateful, and it was like such a amazing experience. We're so grateful to Sundance. So I think that's that for shadowing. It's my understanding is that it used to be a lot easier pre-pandemic, where you could, if you knew somebody who was on a set, you could just sort of say like, oh, can I come shadow? Now it's like the opportunities are really hard to come by. And I think that's partly because TV directing jobs are really hard to come by. I mean, there are full-fledged TV directors who've directed many, many episodes of TV who, aren't working right now because the episodic TV is in a state of contraction. But I think that again, not to discourage anybody. I always think reality is a good thing.
No, I think that's why we're here. I mean, ultimately it's like why I don't want to paint, a fake picture. It's like, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
What's really happening.
Yeah. And I think it's good to know how hard it is because you have to prepare yourself for the hustle of it. I mean, because I think for me, I have a friend who was a writer on in the room on Grey's Anatomy, and she introduced me to a sort of senior writer there who was a theater lover and was really excited about trying to help me sort of break into that world. And then he, for the better part of 6 months, advocated for me to shadow on this show.
Yeah.
And that's one thing where I think what you were saying before about humility, where you would think, if you have a Broadway credit or, whatever, you could sort of just walk onto a set and be like, I'm here, I want to learn. And that's not really the case. I mean, it was so competitive. And the other, ultimately, this writer, I'm so grateful to him, succeeded in getting me onto the set. And that's really, Debbie Allen, who runs the directing program at Grey's, was really generous in giving me that opportunity. But I think that, a lot of the other shadows in the season were folks who had directed multiple episodes of TV already, who, were getting familiar with a new kind of show or a new show. So, I think it's good for people to know, no matter what corner of the entertainment industry they want to go into right now, it's not going to be easy. And that's a choice that we all, make, that when we say, this is what I want to do with my life, I feel really strongly about this being what I want to do with my life. We're making a choice to have a hard time, and that's okay. It's just, you just have to know if that's for you or if that's not for you. And it's fine if it's not for you.
Yeah. I think, I mean, I can speak on this for myself in terms of just when I first started my career, and then now over a decade as well of doing this, how, from a personal level, how much I have changed, but also just post strikes, post pandemic, post a lot of large macro things that actually affected the infrastructure. And then from, even within the internal little infrastructures, how those things are also still shifting. It's just, we are really living through a very interesting and difficult macro and micro time. And I think for me, the thing that's been a shift and also an attempt for positive change is really recognizing that as I'm choosing to continue staying engaged in this as my career, the process of this difficult process, that is what I'm choosing. Yes, the result of ideally I book a show or ideally I get to be involved in a development of a project, whatever it is, that is the reward. But truly more so than ever of yes, you as an actor, for example, your job is to audition. It's even more your job is to hustle and then hopefully get the audition and then hopefully book the room. And then hopefully you get the job at some point, maybe not that year, but maybe in 2 years when they finally remember you and now you have a better relationship. It's really wild about the barometer shifting and the way in which the choice isn't really the concept of the job. The choice is the daily rigor that goes into choosing it every single day.
I couldn't agree with you more. 100,000%, because I think my job isn't directing. My job is sending emails about myself directing.
That part. That part.
But I so agree. It's and you have to love that. And I get made fun of in a loving way on social media because I post a lot about my email. And my friends are here she goes posting about email again. But I'm no, my life is truly my inbox, and I have learned to gamify my inbox and love my inbox and
color coordinate folders and
and because it's if in the absence of needing to do something else, I'm emailing. And so it's you really have to, and I just I really love the art of email, and I love I am satisfied when I'm good at email, so I think that if you want to be, maybe email less so for folks who are on stage or in front of the camera or whatever. But I think if folks want to be directors, you really have to learn to love email.
Have you been using the same monologue for years? Are you gearing up to apply for BA, BFA, or MFA programs and need pieces for that process? Or maybe you just have no idea where to even start with monologue hunting? I get it, and that's why I offer monologue sourcing. This is a unique process where I find monologues chosen specifically for you. So many artists pick pieces based on external labels like type or for roles rather than finding material that represents who they truly are. So here's how it works. We'll meet virtually and you'll share all about who you are, your passions, values, beliefs, and everything in between. Don't worry, I will help guide you through this process. Then I'll get to work finding monologues that fit you like a glove. With years of experience sourcing pieces for hundreds of artists, I've seen the difference it makes to have a monologue that genuinely feels like you. So, if you want to feel empowered about the monologues you bring into rooms and use for auditions, I would love to help you find them. And because you're a listener of the Empowered Artist Collective podcast, I'm offering an exclusive rate. Head to empoweredartistcollective.com/podcast promo to register and claim the special offer. That's empoweredartistcollective.com/podcast promo. I cannot wait to help you find monologues you absolutely adore. Well, let's talk about your directing style. We've been talking about your life and all the things. How do you think you direct? I don't want to say how do you direct, because I imagine, it might change depending on project. But if you were to synthesize your process, if there is a process, is it the same again across all multimedia? Is it for every show? It's different. How do you approach your process? And when does it start? I guess when there's a thing.
Yeah. So, I'm pretty research oriented. And so oftentimes when I'm starting a given project, I'll start with research. I like to try to engage in a subject matter every day when I'm prepping for something. And so what I'll do often is I'll email myself a task every morning. So I'll say, okay, this morning you're going to spend 15 minutes researching I'm working on a show that takes place in California. So we're researching the different wooded areas of California where the show specifically could take place. So I'll spend 15 minutes looking at pictures of trees, right? And then I'll email myself the next morning. Okay, this morning's task is this. So that's sort of how I start off, and then eventually, once you start adding on other people, it becomes this very exciting collaborative process. But I think that in terms of the capital D directing aspect of it, it's usually, I like to, pre-block everything. And that's not to say that when I get in the room, that's not going to change a million times, or actors can't have input or have ideas about where they want to move. But I like to, come in with a plan. I'm analog, so I do it all on paper with pencil. It really helps my brain for whatever reason. I've tried many times to switch over to something digital, and it doesn't work for me. So so I come in with these little charts, and then by the time I'm in the room, I mostly know what's on my chart, so I'm not really looking at them very much. But it helps me to have that in my hand just as a tool. And then I think the process in the room for me is very much I'll set the tone with starting with an idea, but then actors and whoever else is in the room, choreographer, music director, whatever, we'll sort of edit together. I'm like a serial editor. I love doing passes at things to make them, starting with a sort of broad strokes version and then getting more and more detailed, or adjusting different things to get a scene or a number right.
It's fascinating to hear. I love it. I love knowing people's processes. I think it's an interesting entrance into their brains and their artistic point of view, and also how they approach work and their work ethics. I find it fascinating. Why do you feel for yourself there's a version of it that has to be prepped beforehand, or have you tried it when you're just actually let me just see, or was this in college where you're I'm going to try this here and there's no stakes? When did you discover that it's no, I actually need this plan?
It's funny you asked that, because I have have a specific story, but I think for me, the reason I started prepping that way was because I often direct things with large numbers of people. And so if you have a cast of 30, for example, and you come in and you say, all right, like the window's over there, the chair's over there, like, let's try the scene. And there are 30 people, it's going to be like chaos. So I think that to me, I like to sort of have a plan, and I'm also like very OCD. And so like, I just, it helps my brain to like know what's going to happen. Like, I don't like not having control. That sounded very controlling, but you know what I mean? I don't like not having like a plan, but the story is when I was working on Great Comet, Rachel Chapkin doesn't, prep on paper. Or at least when I worked with her, she didn't. So she would sort of have like ideas in her brain, and then she would come in and like somehow something magical would happen. And I was always very like mystified by it. So one day I said to her, I was like, Rachel, like I can't direct without a piece of paper in my hand. Like, how is it that you are doing this? And she was like, well, I just do it. Like, and you should try it. And so she said, I dare you like to go into rehearsal next week. Cause I was in the middle of directing something myself. Go into rehearsal next week. Without a plan, like go in without paper and like see what happens and like just try it. And so I did that, and it was on a relatively smaller show. It was a cast of 15, and I went in no paper, and it was like the worst day of rehearsal of my entire life.
Oh, poor thing.
Yeah, it was terrible. Which I'm not blaming Rachel. It was a good exercise. I'm really glad I did it. But because I was like, oh, her brain works that way. Like she can like on the fly, like see things. And for me, I really have to plot it out, even to the point where like when I'm in tech, you know, oftentimes in tech, you don't have the luxury of like fully prepping a number before you do it. But I will, you know, if I have a preview the night before and a number's not working, and I know that the next day I have to tech a new version of that number, I will go home from that preview and I will stay up 3 more hours and I will draw it out on, you know, paper and pencil, because it won't work for me. If I come in and I'm on the God mic and I'm making things up as I go, it just doesn't, you know, for whatever reason, my brain can't do it. So it's like, you just have to know yourself, like, and you know what you're good at, know what you're not good at. And for me, I've learned that I'm good with prep and I'm not good without it.
Yeah. I love that you're self-aware. I feel like there's like the theme of this whole entire episode thus far is like your self-awareness and like your curiosity, and also like, it's just, and humility, but also it's, the self-awareness is great, and I just want to commend it. And yay. Does this shift, you kind of mentioned tech, how does the process shift for you, or does it, as you enter into the various stages of, so like now we're in tech land, or, you know, we're in previews and now we're open, like do things shift for you as things get tighter and more specific?
Yeah. I mean, I love tech. I think particularly, I think the more experienced you get, the cooler the toys are that you get to play with in tech, for lack of another way of putting it. But, you know, like some of the last few musicals that I've directed have had like elevators in the floor, or turntable, or, you know, automation where things are flying in like this or flying in like this. And I think that for me, it's really thrilling to see what kind of magic you can make when you have those kinds of tools. And that level of automation is not something that you get to work with early in your career, you know, so it's like when once you do, it's very, very exciting, I think. But in terms of like stages of process, I think that it's really exciting when you get an audience in. I mean, it changes the dynamic. I mean, for me, it's equal parts like thrilling and terrifying, because it's so funny, you know, like I'll watch a run through and feel like I have a certain understanding of the show. And then I'll watch the next night, I'll watch basically the same exact thing, but with an audience. And suddenly I'll see everything that's wrong, because my brain is sort of just more conscious of the people around it and how they're reacting to it. So, I'm really not precious as a director, almost to a fault, like where, if something's not working, I'll be like, try this, like, try this, you know, where I think like some other directors are like, no, I'm sure this is going to work. Like, we're going to figure out how to make this work. I'm a little bit like, try this new thing, try this thing, try this, you know, like, like a little like trial by error, which sometimes there's not time for, and sometimes you just have to like make a choice and run with it. But I do my best. But
Yeah.
I both love and loathe the part where we get people in the audience.
Yeah. Well, it's informative in a very different way. And it's part of why I ask like how and if it morphs as, the process continues, because all these new elements are thrown into the mix. What about for you and finding collaborators? I guess, are you sometimes paired with them and it's a new experience? How do you learn to grow and, find your way of communicating with them? And, or do you now kind of have like a curated group of folks that's like, I have a show, this is my AD, often I bring them with me always, and I love this lighting designer, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, I think that, people that you trust are at such a premium, because trust is something that takes time to build. And so I do definitely have a crew of folks that I've worked with repeatedly. I'm thinking about like Jason Sherwood is a designer that I've worked with on almost every professional theater production that I've directed. Bradley King is a lighting designer that I work with a lot. I have 3 ADs that I've worked with many, many times. So it's sort of, you find people that you love and trust, but I think it's important that every production has a bespoke group of people who are the right people for that production. And sometimes your go-to person isn't the right person for a given production for many different reasons. And so I try to the best of my ability on every new show to kind of make it like half veteran people. I mean, veteran's a weird word for it, like half people that I have worked with before and have like a ton of trust with, and half people who I'm new to, but have lots of reason to trust from either recommendations from people who've worked with them before or work of theirs that I've seen. And so it's like a different equation every time, but I'm always trying to see as much as I can and trying to meet as many people as I can so that when a project comes up, I can say, oh, this person's work on that would be perfect for this. And like this person's expertise in this subject matter would be really perfect, so that you can kind of build the right constellation of people to make something wonderful.
And then go back to your inbox and send those emails. It's like very, very real.
Yeah.
It's very real. Do you get to choose every time, or I guess maybe it changes depending on the disciplinary space that we're entering into, but how much autonomy do you have when you are offered a project to be like, actually, I need to choose these folks versus they're assigned?
I think I always have like veto power, and the majority of the time I get to choose. But there are certain situations like MDs is a category where like sometimes the writers will want a certain music director and I will have the ability to say no. But for the most part, I sort of defer to them on that choice as long as I think the person's a good idea. And then vice versa, like in other categories, usually I'm the one to choose, but my writer and producer collaborators usually will either approve or veto. More often than not, they'll approve. But like I've had a few situations where like I've brought a creative to the table, and then my collaborators have said like, no, I don't think they're right for this, or like, no, I don't have a great relationship with them, I don't want to work with them. So you kind of have to navigate those situations. But for the most part, I am steering hiring, and I take that responsibility really seriously, because I think not this year, but like 2 years ago, I added it up in 1 year, like how many hiring decisions I was involved in, and the number was like 250. And wow. I was like, in a given year, to be involved in hiring 250 people is like a really big responsibility, and something that I think, particularly when we think about like who makes up our industry and who is being given opportunities and who isn't, like that's something I take really, really seriously. And I'm often a little too intense about it to the point where when I work with some casting directors, they'll be like, Sammi, can you please make a decision? Like, stop hemming and hawing. Like, we really need to go. But I agonize over certain decisions because I know how meaningful it is to have a job, you know, and in this industry where jobs are pretty scarce, like to be in a position to hand somebody a job is something I think a lot about.
Yeah, I'm not sure many folks recognize the full breadth of responsibility of a director besides just like staging the thing and putting it up. And then, you know, and so to name that that's part of a potential responsibility and to recognize the privilege, frankly, and also responsibility in that is a huge deal. I'm curious, other responsibilities that you feel you take on when you are directing.
It is very much a catch-all position. And I think that a lot of directors sort of operate on the basis of like, if it doesn't fall into somebody's court, I'm just going to do it, which is a little bit toxic. I've had to get better at like delegating because I was often just like, okay, I'm just going to do it. And then people will be like, no, that you should really, you know. But I think I'll say one of the things that I have been surprised about as something that like when I was in college, I didn't think was part of directing is the management of interpersonal relationships, I would say, as a way to put it. Like, I often find myself involved in situations within a company where one person might not be getting along with another person and or one person isn't comfortable with another person, or one person is dealing with something in their personal life that's sort of affecting their ability to work. Like all those things are, I think, have become a director's purview. In addition to producers and stage managers and GMs, now more than ever. I think that I spend a lot of time doing things that in another industry might be considered the job of an HR person. And I don't resent that. I just think that sometimes I worry that I don't have the training to handle those situations, because what I learned in school was how to stage a scene and how to tech a show, not how to be the best possible support system for somebody who needs support. And so that's something I've had to sort of learn on the job. And I take on that responsibility with the meaning that it carries, because I am the person who stands at the front of the room, and I understand that, but it is an unexpected responsibility, I would say, and something that I find in my day-to-day very challenging. And when I talk to other directors, we sort of, it's a hard aspect of our jobs that we weren't, I think, for many of us, sort of equipped to deal with when we first started directing.
Thank you for naming that. I feel like, this is like a larger conversation about like structures and systems and how, you're not the first and won't be the last to talk about the fact that in most of these spaces, there aren't HR kind of jobs or, DI folks or intimacy coordinators or whoever are people who are therapists, like literally who are trained to hold these spaces and the harm that can be done and unsafety that people feel often just because there isn't the infrastructure to hold it. And then whose responsibility does that become? And it has to become somebody's. And it's a large question and it's a large issue. And I think naming it hopefully allows people to just become more aware of it. And then we can hopefully do things about it. But that I can imagine is tough, especially when arguably your main purpose of being there is for the art and to facilitate art. But in order to do that, people need to feel safe to create said art. And how do we make that happen? How do you find your assistant directors? And do they cold email you? Or do you, go to showcases and see people's work? And how do you find them?
So cold emails mostly. And any director who cold emails me and has questions or wants to talk, I always say yes and hop on the phone and have a call with them, and then I keep really detailed notes on who I've talked to and who might be a good fit for certain kinds of things. And then I think people are sometimes surprised when, like 2 years after a phone conversation, I'll email them and be like, "Hey, are you around? Because I have something." But I think it's an opportunity, I think, for me to get to know them based on the kind of questions that they might have and sort of, what they're in. I always sort of ask them a few questions about what they're interested in. So that's kind of a way. And then I think to me, there's a difference in sort of who is right for assistant work and then who is right for associate work. Because
can you break down the difference for you?
Totally. For me, the difference is associates are people who can be left in a room alone without a director. So when you've opened a show and the director leaves, the associate would be the one who stays on to maintain it and is in a rehearsal room by themselves running the room, right? Or they're going to auditions without the director, or if there are kids in the show, they're rehearsing with the kids in another room while the director is in the room. Assistant director wouldn't be left alone with actors in a room. They are more at the director's side, doing things like taking notes and doing research and like things like that. So I think the skill set for an assistant director more than anything is really just like being really hardworking and being really organized and being really willing to like put in crazy hours. Sorry, but it's true. That's assistant directing. I think associate directing, you really need to get a sense of somebody's ability to maybe not be like have a vision as a director, but have excellent ability to communicate with actors because, as a director, I leave and they are there, communicating things to actors. And I want to make sure that the way that they're communicating is in line with sort of how I would want the production to be run. So I have 3 or 4 associates that I've worked with in the past few years, all of whom I've seen some level of their work and have seen them. I think in most cases, they were my assistant director before they were my associate director.
I was going to ask, is there like a pipeline? Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that like also, I know a few associates who work for other directors who I'm like, oh, I would feel comfortable hiring them because I know how that director works and I know that it's similar to how I work. So they would sort of mesh in. But I take really seriously that like oftentimes assistant and associate directors are on their own paths to becoming directors. And it's also my job to make sure that what they're doing is an additive step in their journey. And so especially because I was so fortunate to like have great mentors who were directors that I worked for when I was an AD. So I think a lot about that when I'm hiring and looking for what can they give to the production, but also what can the production and I give to them and to their journey so that it's mutually beneficial.
Yeah. Right now in your career, what are you most excited about?
I'm taking a second and I'm being vague because 2 of the things I'm most excited about, I'm not allowed to talk about.
Great. We love tune in later, friends.
So 2 things. I'm only saying that so that if anyone involved in those 2 things ever listens to this, they know I'm really excited about them, but I'm not allowed to talk about them. But the one thing—
Can we talk about the umbrellas that they fall under, or we can't even? Okay.
Yeah. So I am working on in ceremonies world. So I've always been really excited about ceremonies world. And it's like, if you know the Olympic opening ceremonies, it's like ceremonies like that happen in countries all over the world. So I am working on one this year that I'm really, really psyched about. And then I have some upcoming work in episodic TV that I'm really excited about. Then I have this feature film that this I'm allowed to talk about because it's not concrete, but it's the feature film that I was mentioning before that was in the Sundance program that we're going through sort of drafts of now, and then we're making a short film proof of concept version this June of the feature, which is we're really excited about. We're making it with Dolby and with a company called Anti-Gravity Academy, and I'm really looking forward to doing that and learning a lot about a medium that I'm newer to.
All of that sounds very, very exciting, and I can't wait to hear more about all the other things. My one other question for you was, how was it to direct How to Dance in Ohio? Because it was such a specific and different piece, and frankly changed the infrastructure for a lot of folks to be seen on a stage. How was that?
It was such a gift. It was amazing. I miss it a lot. I think I feel really lucky that my first Broadway experience as a director was one where everybody was making something sort of on our own terms. And it was like, I mean, not our own terms can mean a lot of different things. So I'll define that. What I mean is that like we were making something that had principles that we all believed in. You know, it was art as activism, and that was something that like everybody in the room was so passionate about. And so while most of my work sort of falls under the banner of art as activism in some capacity, I think that I feel really lucky that like I really so wholeheartedly believed in the mission of my first Broadway show. And that, you know, regardless of however something does commercially or, you know, whatever, you know, however long it runs, like to me, you know, making something I believe in really matters to me. And so I'm very grateful that I got to do that.
It was such a gorgeous show and I loved it. And the words should, I hate, but it should have run longer. And that's a whole other conversation. Yeah. But it was a really gorgeous addition to that season and certainly to the canon. And congratulations on a really impactful, beautiful piece of art. I am really grateful that you went on this journey here in this little podcast land and to share your experience. I feel, you know, again, the series exists so that people can see the breadth of possibility. And it's very clear within the way in which you work and how you continue to put yourself in new spaces and different spaces and expansive spaces, that your career is going to continue exploding and being incredibly impactful. And so thank you for sharing the insights into that and how you navigate all of it. I'm very, very grateful that you lent your story and time and energy into this series. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be here, and thanks for highlighting directors and for the wonderful questions and everything. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. If anybody wants to hire you, work with you, reach out.
Yes.
What within your boundaries are the best ways for people to slide into your emails to reach you?
No boundaries. No boundaries. Seriously no boundaries, because my email is on my website. My website is my first name, last name.com. I think my cell phone number was
remove that. Yeah, no, that's immediately.
That was like, wow, that was crazy. But I also I'm an Instagram fiend, so I respond to DMs there, everything. Sometimes I'm a little slow, but I try my best to answer promptly.
Thank you so much for being in this space.
Thank you for having me.
That's it for today's episode. I hope you walk away with some fresh insights, feel inspired, and a little more empowered to take the next step on your artistic journey. Remember, whether it's a small shift or a big breakthrough, every step forward counts. You've got this, and we're here cheering you on every step of the way. If you found today's episode helpful, don't forget to hit subscribe so you'll never miss out on the discussions we have each week. And if something today really resonated with you, please leave us a review. It truly is one of the best ways to help other artists find our podcast and join in on the conversations. Plus, we feel the love too when you do. And don't keep all this goodness to yourself. Share this episode with your people or post about it on social media. Be sure to tag at Empowered Artist Collective and at @JenniferApple_ so we can see what's landing for you and keep the conversation going. As always, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for being a part of this incredible community. Keep creating, keep thriving, stay empowered. I'm Jennifer Apple. Until next time.